in the desolate landscape of post-Meissen, World War II Europe, teetering on the brink of economic ruin and political chaos, a monumental American initiative shone as a beacon of hope. Named after then Secretary of State George Marshall, the Marshall Plan not only reinvigorated war-ravaged European economies, but also laid the groundwork for an unprecedented era of cooperation and integration in Europe. Its story is not merely about the resurrection of Europe, but also the careful crafting of a post-war world that fostered mutual dependencies and diplomatic alliances, which have largely shaped international relations to this day. The end of World War II left Europe in ruins. Economies were shattered, infrastructures demolished, and political instability threatened to upend nations. Countries like France and Germany, once industrial powerhouses, were reduced to economic skeletons. The dire need for a comprehensive recovery plan was evident, but the path to rebuilding seemed insurmountably steep. Despite the devastation, the spirit of rebuilding was palpable across the continent. Yet, without substantial intervention, the European phoenix would struggle to rise from the ashes. Nowhere was the desperation more visible than in the breadlines of Berlin or the makeshift shelters of Warsaw, where the war's scars were a daily testimony to the need for monumental change. When George Marshall proposed the plan that would bear his name, it was clear that America's interests were tightly interwoven with those of Europe. On one hand, the economic revival of Europe was critical to the health of the American economy. European markets needed rebuilding to consume American goods. On the other hand, the geopolitical landscape of the Cold War painted Europe as a crucial battleground for influence between the United States and the Soviet Union. Strategically, the objective was not only to avert the immediate crisis, but also to prevent the spread of communism across a weakened Europe by promoting political stability and economic prosperity. The motivations behind the Marshall Plan were thus a mixture of altruism, practical economic considerations, and geopolitical strategy. The Marshall Plan, officially known as the European Recovery Program, channeled over $12 billion, equivalent to approximately $128 billion today, into Europe. The funds were not issued indiscriminately. They were invested in specific projects involving infrastructure, industry recovery, and agricultural enhancement. Countries receiving aid had to create comprehensive national recovery programs, which were then reviewed and agreed upon. This process ensured that aid was tailored to the needs of each country while aligning with broader economic goals. The result was not just an injection of funds, but a sweeping revitalization of European economic infrastructure. Key industries were modernized and vital transportation networks reconstructed, thus laying the foundational stone for future growth. The Marshall Plan, despite its broad objectives, incited a spectrum of national responses that ranged from enthusiastic acceptance to skeptical reluctance. In France and Italy, where communist parties were gaining significant traction, the plan was seen as a lifeline to counter potential communist domination. However, the acceptance of the plan often came with political strings attached, leading to internal debates and tensions. In these nations, the implementation of the plan was not just an economic decision, but also a clear political statement, aligning with the West against the Soviet influence. Meanwhile, in countries like the UK, which were less vulnerable to communist influence, the response was tempered by concerns over sovereignty and the fear of becoming too economically dependent on the United States. The Marshall Plan was as much a strategy for economic recovery as it was a tactical move in the Cold War chess game. The Soviet Union, perceiving the plan as an attempt to undermine its influence in Eastern Europe, responded by tightening its grip on the Eastern Bloc. This led to the establishment of Comecon, a Soviet-led economic group intended as a counterbalance to the economic integration promoted by the Marshall Plan. This polarized response deepened the ideological divide between East and West, reinforcing the bifurcation of Europe into two distinct economic and political spheres. The Soviet reaction underscored a fundamental aspect of the Marshall Plan. its role as a catalyst in the formation of what would become a continent divided. While the Marshall Plan is predominantly remembered for its economic ramifications, its impact permeated deeper into the cultural and societal fabric of Europe. The influx of American goods and culture, facilitated by the plan, introduced a new wave of Americanization in Western Europe. This ranged from cinema and music to consumer products, which played a subtle yet significant role in shaping European post-war culture. Moreover, the plan helped forge a new European identity, one that embraced cooperation and mutual dependency as mechanisms for peace and prosperity, contrasting sharply with the nationalist fervor that had fueled the war. The societal shift was profound, setting the stage for a new Europe that was markedly different from its pre-war self. One of the Marshall Plan's less heralded yet crucial achievements was the establishment of institutions that fostered cooperation across Europe. The Organization for European Economic Cooperation, or OEEC, created to administer the plan, was pivotal in encouraging European countries to think beyond national boundaries and towards a shared future. This body not only managed the logistical distribution of aid, but also served as a precursor to more permanent structures of European integration, like the European Economic Community, or EEC. The governance structures established under the Marshall Plan provided a blueprint for the cooperative European governance that would later crystallize into the European Union. The transformation of West Germany and France serves as illustrative case studies of the Marshall Plan's efficacy. West Germany, in particular, experienced what came to be known as the Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle, primarily fueled by Marshall Plan funds and economic reforms. From the ashes of a defeated nation, West Germany emerged as a robust economy, eventually becoming Europe's economic powerhouse. In France, the plan facilitated modernization of its industrial base and agricultural sector, which had been devastated during the war. This not only boosted the French economy, but also helped stabilize the political landscape, which was fraught with tensions from communist factions. These examples highlight the Marshall Plan's role not just in economic recovery, but also in laying the groundwork for future prosperity and stability. While the Marshall Plan is often lauded for its successes, it is also subject to criticism. Critics argue that the plan was a tool for the United States to establish economic dominance and create a market for its goods, rather than a purely altruistic aid effort. Additionally, the focus on Western Europe led to the neglect of countries in the Eastern Bloc, exacerbating the economic disparity and political tensions between East and West. Moreover, some historians contend that the plan contributed to the dependency of European nations on the United States, influencing their political and economic decisions long after the plan ended. These criticisms underscore the complexities and dualities of the Marshall Plan, highlighting that its impacts were not uniformly positive and were interwoven with broader American strategic interests. The Marshall Plan played a pivotal role in fostering European integration, serving as a catalyst for the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, and later the European Economic Community, EEC. By promoting economic cooperation and interdependency, the plan helped mitigate nationalist tendencies that had previously led to conflict in Europe. The economic stability and growth fostered by the plan created a conducive environment for political integration, suggesting that economic interests can indeed pave the way for broader unity. This aspect of the Marshall Plan underscores its significance not just in immediate post-war recovery, but also in shaping the trajectory of European unity and integration in the decades that followed. The Marshall Plan had profound implications for transatlantic relations, cementing the United States as a benevolent leader in the Western world. It established a framework of cooperation that endured throughout the Cold War, characterized by political, economic, and military alliances, such as NATO. This new era of transatlantic cooperation was underpinned by shared interests and values, notably the desire to counter Soviet influence. The bonds formed during the Marshall Plan era laid the groundwork for enduring partnerships and a shared strategic vision between the United States and Europe. The strengthening of these transatlantic ties is one of the enduring legacies of the Marshall Plan, influencing international relations well into the 21st century. Reflecting on the Marshall Plan from a contemporary vantage point, its multifaceted impacts are undeniable. Economically, it helped resurrect European economies. Politically, it was instrumental in shaping the post-war order and Cold War dynamics. Culturally, it facilitated a transatlantic exchange that reshaped European societies. However, its greatest legacy perhaps lies in its demonstration of the power of cooperative economic policies and the vital role of international aid in stabilizing and rebuilding nations. The plan's principles continue to influence international economic policies and aid strategies, highlighting its relevance even in today's globalized world. As Europe stands today, prosperous and largely united, the echoes of the Marshall Plan are still discernible in its economic policies, its political structures, and its international alliances.